welcome you to our Art Smart Women in Clay. Welcome, artists. I also like to thank Navy Pier for hosting us this year for our 20th anniversary show. So if you haven't had a chance, before you leave, go down by the door 10 and take a look at our show. So it's extended to Black History Month, and again, welcome, and I'll turn it back over.
Diaspora Rhythms is an organization of collectors, and I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Lisa McDonald, and I will be moderating the discussion. And we're so excited to have Black Women in Clay, Legacies and New Direction. I'm going to do a brief interview, and each one's going to talk 10 minutes and show their slides, talk a little bit about their work. Then we're going to do a lightning round of questions, and then we will open it up to you for questions and answers. As a collectors organization, we are excited to have the artists here because that's why we exist, to collect their art. And every time we talk, we learn a lot more about them. And so just keep that in mind and hope you get a chance to look at the exhibit in celebration of our 20th year that showcases our collectors' collections. There are no clay pieces because of security and traffic. We could not show any three-dimensional pieces downstairs, but we also, even though there's no clay, no porcelain, no sculpture, we also do collect that. Okay. That's me, and first of all, I'd like to introduce Christine LaRue. Hi, everybody.
Oh, there you go.
Hello, Christine LaRue is African-American artist born in Chicago, Illinois, of Creole and Cuban descent. She is best known for her ceramic sculptures in porcelain, stoneware, or fine silver and copper metal clay jewelry, depicting faces of Afro-Latino origin surrounded by rich textural images. Her use of clay is fabric-like, utilizing bas-relief with flowing detailed designs. One of the things she has she's very grounded in pre-Columbian art history. Part of that is because Ms. LaRue is a graduate of the University of Denver, Colorado, with a BA in Latin American Studies and a minor in ceramics. She also has an MSW from Loyola University, Chicago, Illinois, in multicultural social work. She is shown as art fairs, and currently she's focusing on a high-relief tile sculptures for an exhibit at the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art in September 2024. So welcome. And I've known her through the Hyde Park Art Center, and a lot of the artists here have the Hyde Park Art Center in common. So you'll see some of their connections at the end in terms of how they intersect with each other. Our next artist is Lola Aisha Obara, and she's a cultural worker and artist, born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. She holds many talents under her belt: sculpture, sound, design, photography, and installation art. She has exhibited in art spaces across the country and is currently based in Chicago, Illinois. She co-founded in 2017 Artists in the Room, a collective of artists and scholars who host artists emerging and established in hopes of serving as a catalyst for artist development and networking. Obara has also received residencies, awards, and many speaking engagements. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Entertainment and Media Management from Columbia College, Chicago, and an MFA in Visual Arts from Washington University Sam Fox School of Art and Design. So welcome. I've had fun looking at the slides and checking them out on social media, so I can't wait to hear what they have to say.
Hi, y'all. How are you
Juarez Hawkins is an artist, educator, and curator. Many of us, Juarez has sort of evolved into clay, and when I first met her, she was a painter, and so we'll hear more about how they evolved and what they see at clay as a medium and what they like about it. She received her BA from Northwestern and her MA in Interdisciplinary Arts from Columbia College, Chicago. Juarez added clay to her wheelhouse in 2006 when she began teaching at Chicago State University, studying under Marva Jolly. She found the malleability of the medium well suited to her ideas around identity, spirituality, and the body. She has exhibited widely, and she just came from Mexico in terms of where she's been studying in Mexico City and probably learning a little bit about what Christine is in terms of some of the work and influences of that culture, as well as in terms of basically, the other thing is how she also, in terms of familiarity with the Hyde Park Art Center, she curated Bill Walker Urban Griot at the Hyde Park Art Center, and I think you also have a residency there now, along with Malika, who will meet. So, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. Crystal Sabah. She's has an interdisciplinary practice which includes traditional portraiture, ceramics, and performance. Her practice looks outward to portraits of the world around, taking the forms of traditionally drawn portraits, figurative ceramic sculptures, and portraits on ceramic mugs. Sabah labors over each piece that acts as homage and memorials, and our sculptures a resistance of that act as homage and memorials and are a resistance to white supremacy. Not only do these works infuse the user's everyday coffee and tea rituals, but their ceramic forms will stand the test of time, potentially outliving the user by thousands of years and leaving traces of how we lived recorded by Sabah's hands. She's a creator and curator of freedom from and freedom to events that are improvisational performance environments which interrogate movement and sound. In 2021, Crystal was awarded a 3 Arts Make a Wave Artist Grant, and in 2023, she was awarded an Individual Artist Program Grant from DCASE. And she currently has her mugs for sale at Alma Arts Interiors.
Hey, everyone. Nice to meet you all.
And I look forward to hearing from you, too. And they all do. We all do. Malika.
Yeah.
And we got birds here,
That was a
too.
good opening.
That's free. Yeah. Maybe they'll continue to help us set ourselves free. Malika. Malika, her works have been exhibited in galleries, festivals, and groups and solo shows. She's curator for Women's Made Gallery and curated and coordinated Cultural Connections African Art Bazaar for 25 years. She's going to tell you a little bit more about herself, but I know that she recently went back. Well, she went back to school. She's a teacher, she's an educator, a little shy, and she first started painting. I think that was when I first met her, and then evolved into ceramics. And so, welcome. And then finally, Kenya Moffett Gardner, or Kenya Cree. And what she says is, her relationship with clay is an ongoing exploration of clay, the ability to absorb and adapt. I applied this ideology to art practice and how I approach ceramics and painting by considering a few statements to push myself inside the studio. I reconsider my purpose of what I'm producing, starting with why and answering the question I posed to myself. And the most important part of her art practice is to create a deep connection with her work while simultaneously exploring themes and concepts that are authentic to her personal story. Actively showing up and being consistent in her practice fosters her ability to push herself. And we look forward to hearing more about you too. Thank you.
Hi.
Okay, so now each artist is going to have 10 minutes and we're going to show their slides, and we're going to start with Christine LaRue. Christine, well, you want me just to move it ahead, just sort of wave your finger and say move to
Okay,
the
all right,
slides,
that
okay?
sounds good. I'll wave a finger.
Okay, thanks. And I'll be looking.
All right. The first slide you see here is basically called "It's All About the Hair." Being a black female potter basically means that when you're in a class, ceramic, art, whatever, you usually are the only one, and including even being at art fairs. And so that's what it's been like for those of us like me who've been at this since the 1960s, 1970s. Yeah, I'm a little old. The themes that a black female artist might come at may be very different than what you would see in white artist circles. And so we echo this. This was a piece that I did after hearing about, black women struggling with hair loss from perms. And, and it's like, yeah, it's all about the hair, as you see us sitting up here. Okay, so it's something that I think as a black female artist you want to delve into, okay? Black women all over the world are, who have used perms are wondering, will I have hair by the time I'm 70? So it was something that I think a lot of us will go at in terms of what our dialogue might be, okay? One of the things that I have been challenged with is a lot of galleries have not been wanting to display standing artwork. So I've been moving into bas-relief sculptures. And this was actually born out of a drawing during the pandemic that I did about my great-grandfather, who is Cherokee and African American. And he left the reservation in Oklahoma because of the Osage murders and such like that. The Cherokee Reservation is right across the street from the Osage Reservation. And, he moved in order to protect his family and to prevent his kids from going into the Indian boarding schools. And so tile, particularly tile work with stoneware, can be very difficult because tile is very heavily grog, so trying to get around it is like sculpting with boulders in your fingers. So one of the things that I decided to do as I pressed forward is to look at where my own family came from. And so you'll see that theme as we go through the slides. So my clay journey took me back to my family history in order to, the pandemic did a lot of self-reflection. And that's what comes out of it. As Lisa mentioned, both Juarez and I spent some time in Mexico at different times. And one of the things that blew me away was going to see the Olmec heads. They're literally like 1 ton. And I've read in old literature about, this is really a Native American face and they just mushed it. No, this is the African face. And so, at the time I went, you could actually touch the sculptures in the museums. So, that was another connection that just blew me away. So this actually is what we call fake raku. It's earthenware clay, and you put a crackle glaze on top to age it and stuff. And it's on a tile, and this is a kind of tile that I saw a lot in Mexico. And I was like, let's put the two together. Okay, next slide. One of the things that when you travel, you start seeing and hearing about black people in different places. And this is a bowl that I threw in the early 70s, really. And I was learning about black Japanese because I lived in New Chinatown, and I was running across a lot of people who looked like me, and they wanted to know, what part of Vietnam are you from? And I was like, I don't think I qualify. But I learned about Yasuke, the first black samurai warrior who was from Portugal. And I thought, what would his girlfriend look like? And so that's what got on the pot. I've been working in clay for a long time, and this is my first piece that I did in high school, freshman year. And I was really just exploring faces. And this piece got me in trouble with my parents. My mother, when she saw it, she thought that there was something wrong with me, and so she put me in therapy. And I was like, Mom, I was just exploring, you know. She's like, no. I said, I'm a teenager, you know, of course it's gonna look kind of angsty. So yeah, that got me in trouble. Next one. This is a series of sculptures that I did as I was exploring more of the slave experience and the African experience in Mexico. The first piece that you see here is actually pieces about this tall, and the handcuffs on it are actually real metal, made in metal clay and copper. And I was in a show at one point, and this was one of the pieces supposed to go in the show, and the curator decided that she didn't want to show this because she felt the whipping on the back was too violent. So I'm like, yeah, right. And the other piece here is an Afro-Mayan figure, and this is something that you see a theme about when you travel through Mexico, when you go through some of the museums. You see a lot of figures, sculptures, you know, from ancient times that, well, they don't look Indian, they actually look African because of the thigh development and things. So, and this is basically what the Spanish did. They locked people up culturally, physically, and totally changed the parameters of Mexico and a good part of South America. Next one. And doing some themes for women. Sometimes your own experiences come out and the clay speaks. I had to have a thyroid surgery, and that first piece, which is Copper Woman, came about because I had this big gaping scar across my neck, and I just needed to do something beautiful to show myself, to show that the beauty is still there. And the second one is basically, that's a porcelain. Both these pieces are porcelain, but they are painted. And one of the challenges is trying to find colors that will fit African skin tones. And the second piece is just me having fun with texture. And my mother was a seamstress, and so I got used to using texture as an art form. And it's nice to do that in clay. And this is more into the Mayan African piece, this first little porcelain piece. I call that Mayan parent pot. I was actually having arguments with my parents about getting back into clay, and so that pot came about. And one of the things that's delightful about the African American experience is we're always pushing back, trying to find what our ancestors were. And so this piece is Ancestral Mask. You see the two figures up there? That's something that I think African Americans are always looking for. Where did our ancestors come from? How can that be combined in a piece? And both of these are porcelain. And in fact, the African mask is put on a board of wenge wood from Africa, and that's what our railroad ties are on our L platforms. It's African wenge wood because it was a wood that will last for 100 years. And it's pretty much anti-insect. So when you get on the L, you're traveling across some trees that might have been where your ancestors might have been. Isn't that cool? Okay, I think this is the last one. Yeah.
Chris, thanks so much for enlightening us and always educating us. And so now we're going to turn it over to Lola.
Hello there. During this short presentation, I intend to give you all some entry points into my practice. Whoa, it's a bird in here. Let's do it. Yeah, some entry points into my practice, point out some familiarities and maybe some unfamiliarities, something you all can maybe relate to and appreciate. But we landed on this first image, which is the first slide. This piece is very special to me. It's named after a Rita Dove poem titled, "If You Can't Be Free, Be a Mystery." And as you'll see throughout a lot of the work present here today on screen, a lot of the work is very anthropomorphic. It's very bodily and unbodily, very shapely, looks kind of humanly, but also at the same time very inhumanly. The purpose of this work is a lot of things. I'll share with you a few of the themes that are prevalent throughout my practice. Alongside the shapely and the humanly figure is a commemorative lens in which I use to venerate my ancestors. As Liz said earlier, that's what we're always doing. It's something that's kind of inherent to all Black people, especially Black artists who intend to express themselves through art. So of course it's also a lens through which I see my own work. A part of that as well is a collective and individual memory and remembering. So some of the things you might hear or see will kind of go back to your own individual memory or a memory that's tailored to a Black experience. There are also some spiritual undertones throughout my work. So you'll see some notes of West African spiritual practices within my practice. They're very subtle. I don't think a lot of people notice that in my work, but I'll point them out for you here. There's also a haptic memory, and if you don't know what that means, it's a form of sensory memory specific to touch stimuli. And so I'm often triggering a haptic memory that is regularly used when accessing the necessary forces for gripping and or interacting with familiar objects. And so a lot of the work you'll see is very texturized, very colorful maybe, something that entices you to want to touch or entices a memory that requires touch. There's also a lot of movement and memory and tradition within my work. A lot of the work I look at as a moving object, even though it's very still. Because of its forever changing form, it looks different at all angles. And to me, that's an indicator of movement. There's also the idea of rest as resistance. A lot of the figure or figurative or shapely work that you see is accompanied by a stool. It's kind of an indicator of rest and kind of maybe a reminder for myself and others to pause and take a rest sometimes. Next slide. So this image is a part of it's a little distorted on the screen, but it's a part of a larger show, a solo show that I had at the Hyde Park Art Center, I believe in 2022, titled Hues of Black and Blue. And with that show, of course, I was obsessed with the colors black and blue together, but I also wanted to kind of get at all of the important significance of those colors to Black people in Black life. I think the color blue represents a lot of things in our culture outside of the sky and the sea and it being associated with maybe open spaces, freedom, intuition, imagination, all these things. I think it's important to note that it is a metaphor for skin color sometimes. And I go back to a saying, so black you look blue, maybe pointing to how bruises form, the color of bruises themselves become black and blue. When people mention blue blood, they're often talking about the police state of violence. I also think the blues in general as a musical genre is very prevalent in this work. I think it's a genre, of course, created by Black people, but I think what comes to mind is Louis Armstrong, in his song, What Did I Do to Be So Black and Blue, particularly. It's associated with melancholia, sadness. I like how blue light on black skin looks. And of course, I hate blue, which in the low country of South Carolina and Georgia is very important. Blue had a lot of power to protect enslaved Africans and their descendants. I think this is more known in the Gullah Geechee cultures, and that hate blue is a color that protects you from evil spirits. That's why you'll see a lot of the homes painted in this very light hate blue. That's just a little context of why I choose to use these two colors together and both separately. Thank you. Next. So this is another example of that color. I think this work is titled Blue Magic number 2. Like I said earlier, a lot of the work is very shapely and anthropomorphic. I like to think of my sculptures as maps or a part of an idea called body mapping, and how we think about our own bodies as a map of its own, and how time is told through the use of the body, and maybe even the clay body as well. The body holds water, it holds a lot of memory. I like to think of the scars that we hold as becoming, I guess, more of an iconography of these things that happen to us in our lives. And so a lot of what you see is very textured, very bodily. You might have thought you saw an elbow at one point, maybe the small of a back, maybe the rounding of a shoulder, maybe a neck, maybe a chin. I like to believe that you see all of that in my work. The object is, of course, in itself very still, very mundane, but I think at the same time it kind of grabs you. I think for me, when I'm creating work like this, a lot of memory comes up, and it's a memory of my matriarch and my grandmother. And I think about how my body has interacted with their bodies, and how they've held me and coddled me and have taken care of me. And I think a lot of these shapes kind of represent that womanhood and that life that I held so dearly to. Go to the next one. A lot of the work is also titled after Black women in various ways, whether it's through literary means or through my own matriarch or ancestral matriarch. I'm using those names to of course venerate this work and think of the people who came before me and who've paid several ways for many different people. And so this work is titled Charlene. It's named after the aunt that doesn't play about her money. She is still with us today, and this is me not only venerating her life as it still stands, but also thinking of her as a vital force in my practice, in my life, and how I navigate life as a woman. So these two objects are more, I guess, hitting some of the spiritual realm of, the context within my practice. These two works are from a larger body of work titled Forget Me Not, which is fueled by a haptic historiography and ancestral connections to object, time, and space. They're very round in form, and I consider these to be archives of the body, inspired by both my personal memory and a collective memory. You can kind of see on the left side of that piece, this kind of woven pattern that woven pattern is a pattern I generated that's titled Fingernail File, and it's literally made up of acrylic nails. I would say more of a mold of the fake fingernail, and I placed them in a woven pattern that kind of mimics a lot of African textile work or handwork and design work. It also mimics a lot of the scarification marks of tribes in the West African region, but also a tribe, the Ikorodu tribe, from whom my father resides. And so this was an attempt to bring together two worlds, both my African ancestry and both my African American ancestry, as I'm also thinking about my mother, who was from the south side of Chicago, who used to wear nails this long back in the day. And so it's me kind of creating a fossil for my own identity and repeating it in different works regarding clay. And sometimes you recognize what it is, sometimes you don't, but I like to think that's a part of both an individual and a collective memory in iconography as it pertains to Black life. But yeah, I consider these to be maps as well, kind of mnemonic maps, maps that become a tactile aid for retelling origin myths and other stories of historical importance. They are definitely an allegorical reference, thinking about anti-labor as a point of reference. I think when you have long nails like this, there's not a whole lot you can do, and to me that's very radical, as it's like an anti-labor practice itself. So this work is a lot of things. It's a motif, it's a fossil, it's an identity marker, it's a map, it's a familiar structure in itself, but it's something that I hope resonates with people and in many different ways. They also look like kola nuts, and kola nuts are used in the spiritual practice of Ifa. So this is a piece, this is an example of me using sound in vessel. This work is intended to project sound. I think there might be indicators of the mouth openings as they look like they're singing a bit. But yeah, this is a piece that plays a record of me laughing and crying, and the ambiguity in between the two, so you really can't tell if I'm laughing or crying. And I think that speaks to a lot of Black women's strife today in America. Last but not least, this is Bubblegum Bubblegum. This is kind of touching on children's nursery rhymes. I don't know how many of us remember that. Bubblegum Bubblegum in a dish, how many pieces do you wish? I think nursery rhymes are very near and dear to all of us. They tell a collective story. They differ from region to region, but the premise of the story still remains. They're definitely a metaphor for resilience and desire amongst quiet victims of marginalization. I think a lot of the work I do is very nostalgic and kind of speaking towards a youth, Black youth in particular. These songs definitely helped me communicate to other children when I was younger, and they also come back to me today as an adult. I think a lot of these songs were really made to kind of warn us about the things in life that we were too young to understand. And so when you go back to your favorite nursery rhyme song today, I hope that you can remember why you sung that and who you sung that with. I think that's it. Thank you.
Switch over to Wole.
Let's see, okay. I think I can hear me, so I think you all can hear me. Welcome, and thank you all for coming. I'm gonna start with a real quick shameless plug. Candace Hunter, who has an exhibition at the Hyde Park Arts Center, also is doing a workshop. So when you leave here at the Women's Live Art Studio on the way out of Navy Pier near the McDonald's, they're hosting a workshop. Really fabulous consortium of female artists. They've got a little shop down there, so I had to give that plug. All right. I'm going to start by talking about probably one of my initial influences in clay. As Lisa mentioned earlier, I started out as a painter and still sneak it in every now and then. This is Marvalee Pitchford-Jolly. She's the founder of Sapphire and Crystal. Some of you attended our exhibition in October at the Logan Center. And she taught at Chicago State University for about a good 25 years. I never formally took classes with her. I just started hanging out. Like when I was done with my classes for the day, I started going downstairs and seeing, oh, what you doing? Show me how to do that. In particular, this picture is kind of interesting because I wanted to know how to make those tall pots. I saw her in an exhibition we were in, and she was just walking around her pots like she was just in this magical garden, and I've been struck by cylindrical pots ever since. So she got me started, and clay has a way of sucking you in, as I'm sure these ladies can attest. Next slide. And so you certainly see that influence. I kind of went sort of ape with tall pots, but I also wanted to differentiate mine. Marva's pots are typically painted, and people were mistaking my work for hers. And I began putting faces on, one, out of my background as a portrait artist, and then two, to differentiate my work and keep trying to see what I could get clay to do. The Guardians come out of an ongoing story I've been chewing on about the idea of what if we had, just like you have the American Girl stories of American girls that travel through history, what if we had an African girl story of someone who maybe left for a while and then came back home and is on an ongoing search to find her heritage, to find her people. And what if that person, had a descendant 200 years from now? So it's a story, kind of an ongoing story, and the Guardians kind of play into that as they're markers as this girl travels through in search of her people, as she collects stories, collects individuals that were lost. She creates these markers. So the Guardians stand as those markers. Next slide. Many of these, again, coming out of a portrait background. Some call them masks, and I'll accept that. They tend to be more characters, and I would say these are kind of reflective of my own story. The first one on your left, The Earth That Feeds Me, speaks to a love of gardening, love of plants, a love of nurturing things and trying to get them to grow out of the ground. I'm that person who could buy a plant from Woolworths that was like sick and half dead and bring it back to life. I also like to grow my own food because I think that's necessary for our survival. The one in the center, to-do list, is exactly what it is. It's actually stamped in and printed with one of them or several of my to-do lists. I'm an inveterate list maker. I even have one here. And so it's got the things that go on in the life of a busy teacher. So syllabus and update resume and things like that. So it's got all the stuff I do, because it's well, what happens if your life is kind of written all over your face? I think there's a Earth, Wind and Fire song, Ain't It Funny That the Way You Feel shows on your face. The third one probably speaks to that the most, the soldier. It was a dare I gave myself. I do a lot of things where I find stuff, I call them texture toys, things that I find on the ground, little noodles, graham crack screws, and things like that. I have a friend who gives me a lot of stuff. Here, baby, I know you need this for your play. So, and as I was making this piece, it sort of dared me. It's well, what would happen instead of just putting them around the rim as a cute decoration, cover the whole face with it? And part of me is no, I don't want to do that, that'll mar the face. But the more I did it, the more I loved it. And it's kind of a metaphor for self. I mean, again, the way we feel shows on our face. Certainly physical scars, emotional scars, lack of sleep, joy, and that sort of thing. So I love it in that it sort of shows all of that. But then it's also it's wearing a mask itself, sort of a protective armor to protect all the sensitive soul inside. Next slide. These two pieces come out of a print on clay workshop. Thomas Lucas is in the room, back over there in the corner, and he's with Hummingbird Press. And he had a number of courses where he not only is a master printer, but he also taught people how to do printmaking techniques onto clay. Lino cut is kind of near and dear to my heart, but here I learned silkscreen. So these two pieces come out of that from a technical perspective. Both of them deal with aspects of aging. So you often see the clock that's popping up out of there. I've become more and more ever cognizant of time and how much has passed and how much do I have left and how much I have to work with and how best to spend the time that I have. So those pieces kind of pop out of those ideas, you know, where I've come from and where I'm still progressing to. Next slide. These pieces come out of my recent sojourn to Mexico. I went because I was just really curious, and these are prototypes for larger pieces that I want to chew on. I spent a lot of time, I've just kind of hit every museum that had open doors, including the Anthropology Museum. I think Liz mentioned that one earlier. And it's just amazing the vast cultures that are there, the vast histories, which ties into the vast history of clay, which is like tens of thousands of years old, which means I'll never go see now because there's always going to be something new to learn. But I was really drawn to a lot of Aztec work because I came in the museum thinking, oh boy, I'm gonna look at the Aztec masks and I'm gonna make them out of clay, oh boy. But the Aztecs didn't make masks out of clay. So it didn't feel right for me to start trying to do that or copy that. So I started looking more at how I could use these works to begin telling my own story. So this is pulled, these two pieces are two iterations from the stages of life. You'll often see this in Aztec pottery where they deal with, there's the youth, the younger person, which is usually in the center, someone a little older, maybe aged, middle-aged, and so on, and then death, which is really kind of inevitable. The Day of the Dead, as morbid as it may sound to American taste, comes out of Aztec culture, and it deals with the inevitability of the sort of impermanence of our existence on Earth. And that idea that the more we accept that and just sort of embrace it, rather than have a fatalistic notion about it, it's a lot easier to enjoy life. And so let's see, you have 1 and 3 there. I've been chewing with that one, that's like maybe 3 or 4 times working with the same piece. Some of it I work with native clay bodies down in Mexico, which was more than a notion. We're very spoiled with commercially prepared clay here that has all kinds of nice stuff in it. I got down there and everything I thought I knew about clay, I had to let go. And so that's why these pieces were done. Many of the things I did multiple times. Next slide. Just to preface, these I did in the United States. I've become really interested in the idea of libation and pouring libation, sort of an extension of the Guardian ideas. I'm very interested in ritual pottery and that idea of maybe, you know, creating rituals around the new ritual pottery that I create. And, you know, that comes, of course, you know, we see that not only in African culture, but even the idea of pouring something for the brothers and sisters that can't be here. You know, we've kind of taken that into our vernacular. Birdies, hi.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
They said they spelled.
Hey, okay. Hear that birdie shout out? And so I'm also interested in bottle forms and things with lids on them. And I've yet to kind of figure out what I'm going to store in them. Kim Crutcher has kind of posed the idea of maybe letting her make some medicines and potions and keeping them in there. And I'm like, oh, I do a few tinctures and things too. So it'll be determined over time what becomes of them. But again, it's rooted in that idea of libation and pouring and offering. Next slide. This grouping also comes out of Mexico. What you're looking at are 2 sides of the same 2 sculptures. One, I'm interested in that idea of Janus, the 2-sided forms, and you know, it's got this sort of Greek but also has African forms. You see a lot of African figures and sculptures that are also two-headed. So, you know, it could be split personality, two sides of my being. But what I was curious about here was the idea of the belly, the solar plexus, the seats of power, seat of where we give life, and what happens when we're no longer giving life to physical people. What happens in that space? So again, I'm looking with an eye towards figuring out what I'm going to put in them. Because I see a parallel between what, you know, what's happening here, and if you look at Nkisi sculpture, most Nkisis or Nkandi often have these like boxes on the belly which hold all the potions and the good healing stuff, and usually you drive nails in them to unleash the healing stuff, but I ain't putting no nails in my stuff. But I'm still interested in that idea. So these will eventually be larger forms. Of the two, the one that's on the right is actually open, so that idea of the incensario. There's a lot of copal and sage and things being burned down there. So I was interested in creating something that could conceivably become an incensario, an offering sort of, you know, offering vessel. All right, next slide. All right, I'm in home stretch. I'm going to talk fairly quickly. The one on the left is a figure from Swatilco. And I was very interested in them because they had big hips. There are a lot of them at the museum. And I'm like, oh, shoot, somebody got big thighs. I felt that instant affinity. But what I learned as I researched them more is that no one's really clear on what purpose they serve. They're typically buried with women. And depending on how many children you've had or how wealthy you are, that determines how many of them that you've been buried with. I started making my own. I was curious about the idea that Puebla, where I spent my residency, was a slave market. So what I did is I made, the one on the left has been fired. The other two on the right are pieces that I put seeds in, different flowering seeds, I think sage or some lavender healing plants. And I actually went down to the Zocalo, which was the site of the market, and I kind of hid them in the bushes early in the morning as part of a ritual I did honoring the ancestors who've moved through that space. Because that idea that, man, I've spent all this time down here, and nobody told me that the park I was chilling in was where they sold, you know, where they bought and sold our bodies. Okay, next slide. This piece is still in Mexico. It's an idea I want to chew on a little more. Again, rooted in Aztec symbolism. The host figure is believed to actually carry the ancestors inside of it. And again, kind of riffing off the Nkisi idea, and then also trying to find a way to feminize that idea. I'm really engaged by that idea that my great-grandmother may have carried me in a seed form. And I think, and that's it. I did it. So thank you all.
Right. Hey everyone, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit before I start talking about these pieces and just talk about my trajectory and like how I'm even here with all of y'all. A lot of us, I know there's some other educators on the panel. There's a lot of interdisciplinary artists, I think, that are within in the room and on the panel as well. I'm a mother. I'm a high school art teacher since like 1996. So 2 kids, so already time shrinking. It's like, oh my goodness. And so for me, I was told, this was like later in the 90s. I'd started teaching high school art at 96, and so I was teaching like lots of different types of things, like intro art classes and like drawing, and then all of a sudden the teacher that was teaching ceramics was like, hey, I'm easing out of here, so it's gonna be you. So I'm like, oh snap, like, hand building fine, but wheel throwing, what am I gonna do? So then I started taking classes, a lot of classes at Little Street Gallery, and really, you know, kind of fell in love, and I was there a lot, you know, exploring textures and different types of firing and wheel work, hand thrown, you know, all of that. And then I wasn't, for many years, I was kind of doing more performance and more like I was getting into my master's in interdisciplinary arts at Columbia. And one of my colleagues is here as well, and we know how much time that took up. And I actually, with my piece, it was a movement piece based off of my infinity, not just infinity, but what happened in New Orleans with the floods, and like how we were perceived, our people were perceived, kind of like left, and no help was in sight, you know? And I wanted to create a piece that had like clay, also movement, visuals, and also an homage to Josephine Baker. And found out after doing a lot of research, she had also done some, with her dance, also had done some blackface, and then I ended up doing blackface as well because of how we were treated in the media. They literally said we were savages, we were animals, we weren't trying to get food or food and different types of help, that we should be killed on sight. And I was just like, no, this is, if they were all mostly white folks, they wouldn't have been treated this way. So I kind of went down more like performance, movement background, and worked with a lot of musicians. And it wasn't until maybe like 2017, I was working with some movement artists in Baltimore, and every day for about 10 days, they all drank coffee in the morning. And so when I got home, I wanted to thank them somehow, and so I made them all a coffee mug. And I didn't drink coffee, but I was like, I know, hopefully they'll appreciate this. And then after making those mugs, I ended up, because I've always loved portraits, I started like experimenting with some of the things in the studio, in my school studio. Watercolor underglazes themselves, just to see like, wow, or underglazed water, or underglazed pencils, how to incorporate that onto the clay. And there was lots of trials and misses, and but then I finally, it was starting to work with the watercolor underglazes, and it takes a lot of time and patience, but the results were just like, and I wanted to kind of pay homage to a lot of different Black folks and people of color that I feel like within the media or the political realm need their due. So this particular piece was a commission that I was asked to do for a friend's friend. My friend had was playing music at his buddy's house, and he had his buddy's house on the kitchen table had a sculpture. And unbeknownst to my friend, he had a backpack. He put the backpack on the table, but the artwork fell off. And he was like, felt awful. So he contacted me. I want you to make something special for my friend about Thelonious Monk. And I know he had just seen some of my mugs, but he's like, I don't want it to be a mug, but you know, I know you'll do something special with it. And it was fun kind of figuring out like which image of Thelonious and like what types of textures to add, and you know, piano keys and what types of symbols I wanted to add with that as well. Next one. And here I just wanted to show, because sometimes when you have like finished work, especially with the watercolor underglazes, people are like, they're not understanding that there was time and labor put into it. They're just thinking it was like a decal or something just kind of slapped on. It's like, no, I'm literally like from scratch, painting all those different layers and values. And it's nice that it works like watercolor, so if you're unhappy with a section, you can go right back over it, but you need at least 4 layers. And so sometimes what I learned with trial and error is once I've painted something, I don't put the regular glaze on and around the other areas. I'll re-bisque this just to see if there's any spots I got too thin, so that I can go back and touch those up before I put the regular glaze. And I don't put clear over it. I fire to about cone 6, so it's already going to be permanently onto the clay. Next. And this is just another step. It was fun, kind of like playing around with patterns, textures, and you'll start to see like, I really love blues and oranges and reds, like that. That's my color family, so you're gonna see that kind of repeating a lot. And I feel like sometimes patterns are ancestral, and so I was like, oh, these are kind of reminding me of some West African patterns that I've seen with the Maasai or with other tribal groups. Next. And here's the finished piece, and like I said, it was a labor of love. This took me months to do. As we all know, working with clay, it's just patience, especially once you sculpt it, then you have to wait for it to dry carefully, hopefully no cracks, and then the painting is a lot of time, and then the glazing. And this particular piece I was commissioned by artist collector Patrick McCoy. We've been friends now for a little over a year. And Douglas R. Ewart is the subject. Douglas is an amazing interdisciplinary artist, musician out of Minneapolis. I don't know if anyone has ever, been blessed to be friends with him or see him perform. He's a character, like he just lights up the world. His spirit is so like, and when I was given like, he wanted a relief of Douglas, I'm like, this is gonna be so much fun, because I've seen him play a few times. He makes his own instruments, so I was able to incorporate some of those and some of the, and then some of my own play on pattern and texture within his attire and his homemade paint jackets. Next. And now getting back to the portrait mugs, this was one of the earlier ones back in like 2019. 2020 is right after Chadwick passed. And when he passed, I was just like losing a family member. You know, I was so supportive of his film, especially after the first Black Panther, and I kind of went backwards into some of his work. And I wanted to, instead of like putting the whole Black Panther outfit on him, I wanted to put some of the symbols of within that film when they went into the ancestral plane. That was always those particular scenes always touched me the most. And he's an ancestor now. He's eternal. And the time that he was here, he did all the things he was meant to do. And I'm just glad that we were blessed with his artistry. Next. I don't know if any of y'all have seen the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, because I'm so glad I went with my daughter too. My daughter's a young teenager. And I remember like halfway through, I'm just clutching her crying, you know, because of the dynamics between the mother and the daughter. There was tension, but there was also a lot of love. And this particular character was the daughter, and trying to get through to her mother. But and then the amazing costumes, and I was like, it was a lot of stress painting this, but it was also super rewarding once I got into all the teeny tiny details with the braids and the outfit and the face. It was great. And any Saul Williams fans here? Amazing poet, writer. Also, he and his wife, they directed this film, Unanimous Gold Mine, together. And again, symbols. This was all kind of filmed in Rwanda, and there was some beautiful symbols and imagery within the film that I wanted to honor and highlight. And I think it's that. Got one more. Viola Davis, amazing icon. I can listen to her all day. I feel like it doesn't matter if you're an actor or not. She just always spits facts. And she did the thing with this movie, The Woman King. And not sure if everything was factually correct, but her commitment to that role blew me away, as well as some of the other actors within the film. And yay, they said hi to me. And so I wanted to, again, have some imagery of the water, some imagery of, way in the distance, you can see a ship of some of the people from Portugal kind of coming, because, you know, even with all of their might, there was still, you know, slavery was still upon them. Thank you.
That was with his little rain stick, his sound stick, that he did his,
Yeah.
and he used to make little pouches himself.
He's got so, oh gosh, we could talk.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Melinda Rozier.
Speak into the mic for like a Thanks.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. I have to have notes because I'll forget everything. But as she introduced me, I'm a mother, an educator, and an artist. Last of all, most intimidating is that of an artist. Being a mom is a labor of love, and teaching was my passion because I was able to serve others. And just a little blurb, I have one of my students in the audience, and she now is an artist in her own right. And but being an artist though is like being a visual historian. So I have to provide anything that comes beyond me is more of a legacy about us. So things that you leave behind is much more important. There's comfort in anonymity, of course. Being in the background for me is easy because I'm doing what I love without having to be in the forefront. But being an artist means that you have to be present. And that means that you also know that you have to share with others and show your work. My art is more through clay and paint, of course, and wood. I convey stories of serenity, faith and hope, interpreting mood, feeling, and emotion. With statements of form and movement, I construct a spiritually aesthetic connection. At least I hope I am. In my paintings as well as clay and wood, the female figure in its all various modalities is my focus. I won't go into more, but I just wanted to share with you some of my background. And now that I'm still in the schools, but I'm doing more consulting work and still working with students in my own way. But I still have Cultural Connection. I didn't start. It was started by one of the teachers, Sandy Haynes. So we're still doing that at our school, which is a labor of love. And my gardening with my students is also for the past 20 years, which I love to do. So I'm still connected with the community. This work right here is an inspiration that takes form of nature and books and poetry. This work is called Serenity, and the work kind of speaks for itself. It's a story, is a name, and the feeling of the work. Change slides. This series is a series of 7 works which denotes aspects of our strength, our endurance as Black people, because we're more than just survivors. Next slide. She's called Standing My Ground. This is also part of a series where we are beauty, grace, and strength personified. This also, some of my work is, a lot of times I think about poetry in my work, and this made me think of one of Tupac's pieces called A Rose That Grew from Concrete. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with that, so I won't even repeat the poem. We can move on. This is one of the garrots. The garrot is a profession, and I consider most of us sometimes as clay artists. We are also telling stories, and artists do tell stories. So it's a heredity, has been passed down by West African culture. The garrot role was traditionally meant to preserve the geology, and historic narratives of oral traditions of our people. So this image is what spoke to me with that. You can move on. This is Seti. This is also one of my favorite pieces. This was based on, once I finish a piece, sometimes work comes through me. So I don't always know what's going to happen. The clay really tells you what it wants to be and what it wants to do. And this piece is called Seti. And this is based on one of Toni Morrison's books called The Beloved. And Seti, well, she was referring to the scars as a chokeberry tree at one time to soothe and lessen the physically and emotional pain that the scars represent on her back. But that was, what she said was it looked like a chokeberry tree with the trunks and branches all in more of a beautiful kind of thing that she got from being whipped. You can move on. This piece, I know you can't see the inside of this piece, but it has stairs going down and is based on more or less us as women. You know, what are our features and our figure, and it's called Ascension. And I used one of Maya Angelou's poems, of course, Phenomenal Woman. And based on many of the things that I do, you'll find that I'm moved by poetry and nature, and of course by things, the spiritual aspect. Lastly, this one is called Each One Teach One. This is very dear to me, and this is based on one of the prayers by St. Francis of Assisi, and it's more like, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there's darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. So basically, I really want my art to just speak for me and know that it's important to leave something behind. Thank you.
Kenya, you're going to start, but you're going to give another little introduction about yourself.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I sort of got missed in the internet land.
Oh, okay. No worries. So I guess I'll just tell you guys about my bio. I am like a 2020 graduate. I went to Governor State University, so I graduated in the middle of like the pandemic, like the height of it. So the Black Lives Matter movement kind of inspired my work. I think my work is kind of like more like intuitive based, so I kind of base my work off that as well. So for me, I kind of wanted to break down like how I approach my work and like how I get there basically, because like I am conceptual, if that makes any sense. Like I don't really plan my work, I kind of just go. And a lot of people don't like that. So I'll just break down like how I get there. So for this piece here, it's mostly about touch and like unwitting touch basically. Because you can kind of see how like the rib cage kind of goes in, like it's like a filling in a sense. I made this when I was like in Carbondale. I did like a year in grad school in 2020 and it was like too much. So I kind of want to put like these like emotions in my work. I kind of think like the body is like a vessel, and then like we store things in there as well as like dishing stuff out. In regards to like my art practice, I do a lot of like experimentation and then also working intuitively. I kind of guide myself by using like process, content, and like outcome. So like for my process, it's like, do I want to do full figures? Do I want to do fragment work? Or am I like experimenting with like both of it basically? And that's how like I build my composition for my art pieces. But I mostly just let my hands guide me and then just go with it. But sometimes I do sketch out my work. I think now I'm getting to a point where I can sketch out work and make it, because that wasn't always like the plan. Like you have something like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and it's just like clay, and it's just like, oh, you're not gonna do this. So I think now I'm at that point where I can like conceptualize like my ideas. For my content, like I kind of like think of things that I want to explore. Like it could be based off a picture, it could be based off like random things. I'm like looking at people. So my influences kind of like move around, but Benin, like West African sculptures are like my main like inspiration. So I kind of like build from there. And so my outcome is just like, did my approach work? Can I do this in the future? What would I change? Is because like clay is so unpredictable. So it's just like, I think that part of like being a clay artist is like just as important as building, because it's just like, it's not gonna come out as like you expect it. So I kind of experiment with that. I kind of overfire my work. I'm okay with things being like broken or cracked or whatever, because it's a part of the nature, and it also gives my work like this aged look to it. So
So I kind of experiment with like all aspects of my work and just see like what works for me, basically. Yeah, you can. All right, so from here, I try to create hyper like visibility with my work, as far as like diaspora identities and exploring themes of like fragile Black life. So like my relationship with clay is like an ongoing like exploration, and like clay absorbs and adapts. So I kind of think like Black life is like the same in a sense. So for this, I started out making fragmented work. I think like my journey to like ceramics, I just took classes. So I have a pottery background, I have a painting background, a sculpture background. And then I took classes, and then I was just like, okay, I made a sculpture. It didn't come out right because I made it in chicken wire. And so I was just like, maybe try it in clay. And I was like, let me try it in clay. So I kind of like, one of my mentors just like suggested that, and she like completely changed my life. So now I started to like work with the belly because I thought like the body was like centered there, and like I expanded it from like out there. So my early work starts with the belly, and then it starts with myself too, because I was my only like muse or model. So I would just grab my own fat and just like, okay, this is how it feels, let me build around it. So I kind of use myself as my inspiration. I think now I'm just realizing that my work is like a self-expression, and these are just like different versions of myself in a way. You can go to the next slide. So this was made in like 2020, like in a height of like the protest. I think I graduated in like June or something like that, and a lot of people kept getting like arrested. So like that movement of your arm is going back. This is like a photo, so you can't really see like the work is leaning on his hand. So that was the first sculpture I made full size that included like a head and a body and all those like pieces that wasn't considered fragmented. It is still somewhat fragmented because it doesn't only has like one arm. But yeah, this is like my little baby. Like I'm just like, okay, I can do figurative work. Let me keep doing this. And then you can go to the next one. So this one was like, I kind of wanted to do totem work, having like work stacked on top of each other. This is also based off just like a photo I took with a friend, and my head was like on his. I was like, this would be a nice sculpture. So I just did some sketches and it just came out like this basically. I try to make my work my skin tone color. That's like the point, obviously, because I see myself in it. And then also like the Benin sculptures are like this dark, bronzy looking color work. This one didn't really come out as like how I wanted to, but I still like it. It looks very aged to me, and this is like 3 feet. So I also realized I can make really big work. So yeah, you can go to the next one. So this one is like the Benin sculpture as kind of like look. So I kind of continue with like building heads. I made this with a Park District. It was a request, and like I made it in like, I would say 6 weeks. That was an experiment. I didn't think the color would get as dark. I thought it would just go brown, and I kind of overfired it. And I was like, oh, this is nice. I'm just gonna keep this, and this was my intent. So, like Lola said, I like that saying like, so black or blue kind of thing. So I use a lot of blues, and then like for like underglaze, you have to build up the colors. So you can make brown different kind of like ways, and I like make brown with blue. So I try to like have that in my work as like a hidden like quality, basically. You can go to the next one. And this is like, I think this was like, I made this like last year. I kind of wanted to make like these big heads. This is also kind of like 2 feet tall, almost 3. So my work is really big. I kind of want to have like this communal like engagement that people can see this big sculpture that they have to like walk around it, and it's of something that kind of looks like them, or it's them, or it could be, some people are saying that like it looks like Buddha. I know in the previous sculpture someone was like, this is Martin Luther King's head, and I was just like, it's whatever you want it to be. It's however you see yourself in my work. that's like the idea, I guess. But like my inspirations like is myself, because that's like my nose, or that's like my bridge of my lips or stuff like that. So I found ways to add myself and my like self-portraits in a way. So yeah, I think music's working. I feel like I like unlocked this like obscure space to practice in, and it's mostly like the space where it kind of reflects moments that are like mostly felt and not necessarily seen. I kind of want the viewers to have this like emotional connection to it, but obviously because it's really big too, but to be drawn in it in some kind of way and see themselves as like a reflection. And I think I'm going to continue that in the future.
Thank you. Weren't you wasn't one piece at the Museum of Science and Industry?
Yeah, so the one before this one, yeah, did you see it?
Yeah.
So yeah, so this was featured on at the Science and Industry.
Creativity.
Yeah, and then the sculpture that's leaning back is going to be in Expo Chicago. My sculptures have been on the CBS like last year for Black History Month. So a lot of people have like recognized my work before, but I'm out there. I only started in 2020, so I feel like I'm getting there. And I'm like discovering my work, and I can actually be like, okay, this was like my intent. This is what I wanted to show. So these are like my versions of my like self-portraits in a way.
Thank you. We're going to give them all a round. I'm going to do a lightning round of questions that they just need to do what's at the top of their head, no long dialogue. Then I'm going to open it up to the audience. So, what is inspiring you now? A lot of you belong to organizations such as Sapphire and Crystals. You do residencies. What's currently inspiring you now? Where are you receiving most of your inspiration, aside from yourself?
Mexico and Benin.
The current banning of Black history across the country.
I think the current culture of anti-intellectualism being spread across the U.S.
And for me, there's so many people that I've been inspired by, whether they're intellectuals, artists, movers, musicians. Now it's just like trying to make the time to like honor them all.
I'm inspired by anything spiritual, God, nature, poetry.
I will say Benin sculptures myself. My resilience. I kind of keep trying. I feel like I'm kind of connected with clay in that kind of way. It can absorb and adapt, and I feel like as like people, we can do the same.
I got a question for you. How does art free you and the people that observe it? And Kenya, I looked at on your website, and one of the questions you ask is, why do I make the art I make? To investigate, to explore, to work through, to know when to stop and keep going, to know when to leave, because knowing when to stop is most important.
Mm-hmm.
So just curious, but I've been thinking of in terms of, because you all have talked about in terms of it going back, its reaction to some of the things going on. It's a spiritual practice. So how does art free you?
I think it kind of creates like a safe space. You can put like a totem, like a vessel, you can put all these ideas into it, and it can just hold it and be what like you imagine it to be.
I'd like to say that with the pandemic that hit, for those of us, one of the things about ceramics is you usually work in a group because of the requirements of the machines and the clay and such like that. And the Hyde Park Art Center was closed because of the pandemic. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I realized I ain't got no place to work, to do art. And having lost my father at the beginning of the COVID, it just made that even that much more acute of being able to express oneself. And John Baptiste, the musician said that doing art is a means of survival. And I think for a lot of us, it is how some people like to sing, some people like to dance, and then there are those of us who like to create tactily, through painting or ceramics. And this is what drives us. It's a form of expression. And when that expression gets stunted, or you cannot express it, you get bottled up. And that's something that we really have to, as an artist, you have to express however way it comes out. And that's this, like, and I think Horace talked about, sometimes the clay will tell you where it wants to go. And that's true.
I can jump in. For me, the idea of creating a thing rather than the illusion of a thing is really liberating for me, because for those of you who've done painting, you spend a lot of time learning how to make something look like something. And so for me, that idea with clay is that I can make something that looks like something, but I'm also completely free to do something that doesn't look like anything. I had a period of time where I did quite a bit of abstract work, and really kind of non-figurative, non-objective work. And then if you look at like sort of the body of clay artists, we're probably among the more saner of the population, but you can see all kinds of like different neuroses and crazy ideas. And clay really kind of finds a home there, because whatever is going through your mind or your spirit, you can actually make it. And you don't have to go through this, how do I create the illusion of it? How do I compose it? You just make it. So for me, I found that liberating.
I'll piggyback off that. I guess I used to think clay gave me a sense of control. I think more now it's maybe a faux sense of control. Because like you all said, clay is going to do whatever it wants. But I think why it pulls me in, I've been reading Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. I think in this reading, she mentions her philosophy of what God is, and she mentions that God is trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. I thought it was interesting that she used clay as a representative of God. But anyway, she's creating a lot of different worlds with sci-fi, right? When you read one of her books, it's you can tell that she's created her own world. And I think for clay, I think that's what it offers me, a chance to create my own world, quite literally a chance to build it through means of hand building. And so I think that's the sense of freedom that I get from working with clay.
For me, with working with clay, and again, kind of piggybacking off of what Chris was saying about the pandemic, and because I had the luxury of like using my school's wheels, using my school's, kiln, and I'd order, my own clay and stuff. But once that hit, I was able to kind of reach out and like, okay, I need to kind of like create my own studio in the house now, in the basement, and things took a little longer to get there with kiln, because people were trying to like re-equip their spaces for their own studios because everything was shutting down. But once I got it, oh my gosh, I was so thankful. It was just night and day, because I have a really good buddy who I was able to like drive my like kind of drying things to his place and fire them, but having the luxury of just going down the steps and like loading things in and having my own wheel in the house, yeah, it was just really, really liberating, and I'm just thankful that I was able to make that happen.
Question, what are you all up to next? Some of you have shared, I know you're in where you're heading. Are there other things that you'd like to add as to what you see as your next phase? Whereas you did a good job of sharing it and the inspiration.
Well, keep an eye out for September. I believe Liz mentioned the show at the Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art. I'll be in that show as well. Piece to be determined. I'm not sure quite what that's going to be yet. Right now, I'm just making. I have a dream of being able to just work until that vision solidifies. I feel my work is still finding itself. And so my vibe is, let's just keep making it, let's keep pushing it, see where it's gonna lead us. But I'll be showing there, Gallery 400 and Southside Community Arts Center all in the fall. So a lot of it's still pushing forth that Mexican idea as well, the ideas that you saw prototyped here.
Malika is going to be at Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art also with us in September.
Yes, I am. My plan for the next things that I'm going to do is I'm researching about ancestral works of art and African American, Hispanic, and Native American artists. I know very little about my own ancestry, so I want to use what I can find from other African American and other indigenous female artists and use that as a catalyst to honor them and not to copy them, but to get to know where I came from, because like I said, they spoke to you and they speak to us now. So it's important that we don't forget who they are. Also, what Chris was saying, I am going to be over there with them in September. Sometimes I'm going to be showing at One of a Kind in April, and also curating and show some of the things at Cultural Connection in March, and have a show at the Zoe Gallery right now.
My battery just went out, but that's okay. Question for, no, this sucker, because it had your contact information, and I can plug it in. What ceramicist or clay artist should we be looking at that's outside of the Midwest that you follow? Is there any one that comes to mind?
Just one?
You do one, two, or
I got
three?
Liz.
Okay.
I got Liz
So
from Duckworth. Her show is ending very soon at the Smart Museum. Winnie Owens, Viola Fry, Karen Clark, Woodrow Nash, and these ladies. Okay.
I would like folks to start looking outside of us also. One of my favorite artists is Lucy Lewis, Acoma Potters from the Pueblos in the Southwest. You would start to see some of the joinery that we have with some of our Mexican, Latino, and Cuban artists. And keep an eye out for that, because the African American story is wrapped up in South America, Central America, and Mexico and Cuba and the Caribbean. So start looking for stuff like that.
There's also, I was gonna say there's a SICA that is happening in Virginia. I'm going to be showcasing there. I have a new sculpture that I'm going to premiere there as well. But SICA could list you with a lot of clay artists of all different colors and areas, honestly.
How do you spell that one? Because I'm trying, is it I?
ECEA.
Okay.
I think also Cabo Clay has a very awesome directory of Black clay artists that they work with and that are in network with. Cabo Clay's Kaabo Clay, maybe .com.
Cabo Clay is the first Black-owned collective of clay artists that are fundraising and doing all sorts of projects trying to help other Black ceramic artists. Not only here, but also in Nigeria. They're really working to do outreach and to get us connected. So for the first time, a lot of Black clay artists are going to the Clay Symposium, NECA. I think that's in March, if I'm not mistaken. So Cabo Clay, they're on Instagram and they're also online. And for the first time, we have an organization that is building for us, because basically the white organizations have not reached out to a lot of Black clay artists, except for Hyde Park. Hyde Park has done good. And Southside Community Arts Center.
I was just gonna say, for me, I kind of got connected with certain folks through Instagram. You know, I started posting, hashtagging, like, and then sometimes I'd start getting messages. I got a message from somebody from a book company, from Davis Publications. Said, hey, we loved your portrait mug of Basquiat. We love to publish it in the book. And I was like, wait, what? And I was like, is this real? Is this for real? You know, when you get those like unsolicited messages. And it was sure enough for real. And the book itself, it's a great like kind of classroom like thick studio book for high schools. And there's so many. It's like back when I started teaching ceramics, they're really like, we were absent from those books. We weren't in them. And so now, like, oh, there's, you know, Dave Drake, slave powder named Dave, there's Theaster. There were so many of us within this book. And I was just like, wow, these kids, they don't even know what we had to go through, just not seeing ourselves. But I was gonna give a shout out to Oya Studio, Black-owned ceramic studio in Philadelphia. Like, again, they connected to me through Instagram. And we finally got to meet at NCECA last year. And so I'm gonna have I think there's like sponsoring like a mug sale. And so I won't be able to be present, but I'm going to be sending some of my decal mugs there. And then Roberto Lugo is another great potter to follow. Yeah, again, Instagram, I've been like, it's like a spider web of goodness, of like Black POC artists.
What would I was gonna say, not your older self, what would your more mature self tell the younger artist in you now that you know what you know? What a piece of advice would you have given your younger self after you've been through a little bit?
Don't pander to the market. The market is forever changing.
Don't let the white folks tell you that you can't do it.
Right.
Accept your interdisciplinary nature and keep experimenting.
Right, it's okay to have a lot of different interests, not just in one art form. I'm all over the place, and sometimes I would feel guilty. I'm like, no, it's okay, it's fine.
The thing is, be authentic and be true to who you are, and never ever have to give an answer to someone about who you are. Just be true to you.
Kind of like don't tokenize yourself in a way. I don't know if that makes any sense, but continue having mentors and guidance, and you're basically like, we'll find a way.
Thank you all. We're now going to open it up for questions, Q&A from the public. Any questions? Okay, I got some more, but I'm not going to go do the artist.
There's one question right here.
Where?
Lady with the black hat.
I'm only asking this because no one else wanted to ask the question. Thank you.
First of all, I want to say that I really, really, really enjoy this. I guess my question is related to errors. There's one person who's sitting on the panel up there and it's the first person that I've first sculptor whose work was kind of destroyed sort of and was fixed sort of, and you got a very good, you changed it
Yeah.
and made it work. And
Yeah.
I want to let you know that it was one of my favorite pieces. And all of my favorite sculptors are sitting, people that I know are sitting, I know Malika, Juarez, and I'm familiar with your work through Facebook.
Yeah.
My question is this. How do you go about correcting your work when it's broken? For example, I'm familiar with people who've done work, like I said, you have. But not so many people have talked about breaking their work. You know, and I love ceramics. I've only done maybe 2 pieces. But I would like to know, how do you fix it if you have a situation where you're doing your work as a ceramicist or whatever, and it breaks, or and it doesn't look the way it's supposed to? How do you correct that? If you're a painter or an illustrator, that's kind of sort of easy to fix. But one of the things that has kept me away from ceramics is the notion of breaking it and not being able to fix it. So how do you? I mean, that to me seems like it would be very, very, very difficult.
Thank you.
Let me tackle that, since she's talking about a piece of mine that I've had 2 pieces in the studio that were purposely destroyed or damaged, and I had to come back from it. My first teacher was a man by the name of Hamada, a Japanese fellow. And one of the things he introduced us to was the art of kintsugi, that Japanese art, where if something is broken, that doesn't mean that the life of the piece is gone. It means that it can be repurposed. And the Japanese have a way of being able to take pieces like a jigsaw piece, put it together, glue it together, and then on top of that, they decorate the crack. And isn't that a lot like us? We all have cracks, we've all had things that whacked us upside the head, and we gotta rework it. Okay, you get up in the morning and the braids aren't all right, so you wet them and you keep on going. And with clay, there are a lot of techniques like kintsugi, which is using lacquer. There's also paper clay, which you can either make or you can buy at an art store like Blix. And you can repurpose one of those pieces. In fact, one of the pieces that I showed here, the slave sculpture, that was the first sculpture I had ever done in porcelain. And the whole thing cracked up the back. And I repaired that with paper clay. And you can look at it closely and you can't tell. So it's a determination of, if you do it, you gotta learn how to repair it, just like you repair yourself.
By the way, that was one of my favorite sculptures of yours.
Oh, thank you.
I've got another question from the audience, and they want to know, do you feel that galleries and other arts organizations besides the Hyde Park Art Center give you, in terms of the representation of artists, of diverse female artists, give you proper representation? In terms of what are some of the barriers and what are some of the things that are moving on? You've gotten into Art Expo, which is wonderful. You're doing one-of-a-kind show, but just talk a little bit about what that's like in terms of getting your work seen by a wider audience.
Did you want to
I'm gonna go, but I'm gonna let you go.
I think I still kind of struggle a little bit getting into like Chicago's audience, because there already are people who are already established that might still do the same work that I do. I just do it on a larger scale. So I do still face those barriers here. But you can always like branch out to other states. And then like, I know Chicago, like they have to see you somewhere else and they'll kind of like recognize you here, which is kind of terrible. But that's kind of how I did it. And I just did like with institutions. So like the Museum of Science and Industry or like the Clay Art Center that's in New York. They are pushing me to like a larger audience. They're gonna like feature my work in NCECA, so it's just like, just branching out, doing residencies, kind of like work. But I'm literally a baby to this, so I know Lola has a lot more experience in that. area?
Yeah, you know, it's challenging like any other field of work that you're in. I think for me, I find challenge because my work isn't easily digestible. There aren't any faces or any obvious, you know, bodies that are displayed in my work. So I feel that I often get left out of conversations, except for this one. So appreciate you. But as far as the wider clay world is concerned, I think it's a bit challenging to straddle both, you know, this idea of fine art or the idea of craft and people not respecting craft as a whole, and thinking about fine arts as something that goes on a wall. I think that's also a challenge. I think there's a lot of responsibility that comes with sculpture. I think you mentioned it earlier about being scared to touch it because of the chances it'll break. I think a lot of people have that fear, and I think it's in the market. It's in, you know, the way galleries stay away from ceramic artists, or, you know, it's in all of these different things. So there's so many things working against us as people who work in clay. So yeah, very challenging, very rewarding when you do get recognized, and when you are in Expo, or you are, you know, going to NCECA or all these different things. So there's, you know, there's definitely some give and take.
There's also the issue of education. I remember doing the Washington Park Art Fair before it became African Fest. And there were only 2 black ceramic artists at the time. And, you know, there was my first show on the South Side. And I was so excited, but I was also so disappointed because people would just walk by and say, "Oh, you got this from Target and painted it?" And I'm like, what? And that same year, I did a show in Pilsen. And I had more people coming by my booth who were Latino, who probably maybe only had a 4th grade education at that. And they picked up my mugs and they picked up things, and they were like, the whole family was like trying to put money together to buy something because they knew the art that was required to do this. And getting the education out, particularly amongst your own people, you know, why would I need to buy a mug from you? I can just go to Target and buy a mug. I go to Walmart and I go, yeah, but it's not made by a black person. And that's made in a factory, and this is handmade. The issue is, in American society, we don't treasure works that are handmade. We just don't. In Japan, or you know, you have artists that the government pays to do the work because you are continuing a product that's called Gilder's Paste Wax that comes in all sorts of colors. You can make something that looks totally bronze and it's made out of ceramics and it's only fired at a biscuit.
Okay,
So yes, cold surface finish,
that was
right?
my question. Thank you.
Can we have a round of applause for our artists? DE, the executive director, is going to bring us on home. And if I can ask the artists just to stay and stand up, if we can take a group picture afterwards, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, good afternoon, everybody. How you doing?
Right.
Good. This has been exceptional. Of course, I knew it would be, all right? Black women in clay. Man, it all started with you. I had a conversation with Christine, and she called me up, and she was highly upset. She goes, "They don't know how to hang my art." And we had this long conversation, and I said, you know what? I have such a great respect for what you guys do. And I said, well, first, I had to move it down. It started with Malika, because she's my good friend. Well, they all are. And I said to Malika, I said, I need you to get out there more. And she goes, no, I don't do that. I said, I need you to be a part of the programming at our exhibition at Navy Pier, because it's going to be historic. They've never done that before. She goes, DE, leave me alone. So I said, well, Mom, put on your heart. And didn't she do a great job today? We all did. And then my first piece was Juarez's work, okay? And you can just feel what she's expressing through the work, and I think I see that in all of your work, okay? So in organizing and putting this together, and then we had weather that prevented us from having it in January as planned, but it couldn't have been better coming in today because it's also now a part of Black history, and we made history today, you guys, okay? Black women in clay. So the word is out that this is fine art, and you are a fine artist. And I'm glad that Diaspora Rhythms was able to coordinate this to put some visibility on you and the work that you do to help elevate it and educate our community at large. So for that, I thank you, and I'm very appreciative. And thank you all for coming out today to support our programming. Our next program will be here on the 17th. Something happened this morning, real quick. Alita Tucker is our membership chair. We're sitting downstairs in the gallery, and this woman walks up and she goes, "Where is the stained glass exhibition?" And we had to let her know that it's not here anymore, it's gone. It's been gone for about 5 or 6 years, right? And so we're sitting there, and this gentleman comes up, and he's doing all this note-taking by us, and he, all of a sudden, he finally speaks to us and says, "Do you mind if I measure to this pipe up here?" And we're like, okay. Long story short, he was measuring because the space that we're in was dead space here for about 5 or 6 years. And we transformed it into a gallery. So if you haven't seen it, please go downstairs, go left when you get off the elevator, and go check us out, because they extended it to the end of this month. And he shared with us that where we were sitting, the alcove where we were sitting, they're now going to use that to bring back the stained glass exhibition. Okay? So me always being an advocate of Black artists, started asking questions. I said, "So whose work will be in this?" And they told me. I said, "Does he have any Black art in that collection?" They didn't know that there was any stained glass art representation of Black people. I said, well, I invited him to come, and I'm inviting you as well, to come on Saturday the 17th, where we will be presenting culture captured in stained glass by this young man over here. If you stand up, sir, this Theodore Feaster. Stained glass artist. Please come back and check out his approach to representation through a medium where we are very rarely represented, okay? So with that, I'd like to thank you for coming and supporting us. Please go back downstairs and see the galleries. And ladies, let's take a picture, and I have some envelopes for you, okay? Thank you all very much.
And here's the culture.
Vegan leather and everything.
Don't worry about it.
No, it's fine. I figure out how to get it.
Yes. Did everybody shine? Did you? Yes, I did.
Oh, you are?
Lisa.